Record to this computer. Okay. I am having so much fun with computer today. I am Del with Healing Frequencies Music, and I'm here for yet another video. Okay. We are going to ignore that until some other point. This one is about, I have to look at the title of this in order for me to remember, our thoughts, our behaviors, and how they relate to propaganda. As you'll probably, if you paid attention to what's on my YouTube channel, you'll know that I've already put up a video on cancel culture and a video on propaganda. This is kind of like a follow-up because of current circumstances. And so without further ado, we're going to go to the slideshow here in a second. But one thing before that, everything I talk about, I like to cite my sources wherever I get my information. I like to tell you where I found it so that you can go do your own homework, because we are supposed to do our own research and get beyond our personal ideas and the way we think about things. Otherwise, we could get stuck in interesting ruts. So I will put all the sources of where I found the information for today's video. If I found it outside of my own personal experiences, we'll put it that way, those will be below this video. Without further ado, I'm going to share screen. I'm on a different computer today. So we'll see how this works, if it will let me do it. Okay, so we're going to start the slideshow from the beginning. It's a very good place to start. Okay. And as usual, I like to draw back the curtain. All right, let's see if these little buttons work on this Mac like they do on my PC. All right, so again, thoughts, behaviors, and propaganda. And I'm Del Hungerford. Easy to see that. And the key points of this video are, we're going to look at history. We're going to explore the Great Year. And if you've not heard of what that is, I'll tell you a little bit. And cycles of life and within the universe. So the question I'm going to ask is, are we in a cycle? And that sound is Tilly playing on her toy. Then we're going to look at propaganda and human behavior in general. And can we shift things for a better outcome? With that, what can we learn from history? History often repeats itself unless we advance in behavior. And there's been a push in the last 3 or 4 years to erase history. And I'm like, I'm not really sure why that is. Maybe people get too offended too easily, but we really need to look at history, whether we like it or not, so that we can decide, do we need to change something? That doesn't mean we get rid of it, because you're never going to get rid of it. We live in cycles, and we can recognize where we are in those cycles. These cycles include natural events, disasters, famines, civil and political unrest, advances in technology, arts, spiritual awakenings. There's all kinds of things that you see in cycles. And I have to ask the question, is global warming part of a cycle? And I hadn't thought about that until recently. So I'm going to put a lot of questions out there, and I expect that you're going to do your own homework. Human behavior can often dictate how shifts are made. Human tendency favors leaders to show us the way rather than groups working together. I mean, if you go back into history, almost every group, well, not every group, but most groups in society have always focused around a single government or a single leader. And a lot of it's because they're still learning how to work together as a group. And the interesting thing I've noticed is those with influence and wealth, those are the ones who want the control. Now we're going to look at the cycle of the Great Year. And again, if you've not heard of that, here is a good picture of it. And this came from Randall Carlson, his video on, I can't remember the name of it, but it'll be in the link below. And he shows this goes with the precession of the equinox, which it takes 25,000 years for the Earth to get from one position to the next. And about every 2100, 2000, somewhere around their years, we change ages. So you're moving from age to age. And if you look at this picture, the age of Taurus, which is the bull, goes into the age of I might have those wrong because I don't know my horoscope sign, sorry. So you go in from Taurus to Aries to Pisces, which we are just now coming out of Pisces and moving into Aquarius, which is this one down here. So we're on the cusp of an age change. And there's some interesting things to notice when we're changing ages. Here is some historical ages. So we're starting in Aquarius, which this chart says 2150 to approximately 4300, but we don't know that. We probably won't know that for a couple more hundred years. But if you're looking at the last one, they're pretty much saying that it started around the time of Christ. And so it could end anywhere from 2000 onward. And so you're looking at the big things that happens. You've got the life of Christ, which is, you see Christians took on the fish symbol. And this was the decline of the Roman Empire. It was the age of monotheism. There's a lot of things that happened right at that change between Aries and Pisces. And you go back to Aries, you've got the Bronze Age. And before that, in the age of Taurus, you have the rise of Mesopotamia and the Egyptian civilizations. And before that, in the age of Gemini, you have the starting of writing systems and accounting. Writing systems and accounting. You've seen the accounting in the cuneiform tablets. So it's rather fascinating to see how there's major shifts and adjustments within society at the shift of an age. The other thing that I have to ask is, okay, we know that we are on the cusp of moving from Pisces to Aquarius. What does that look like? Well, here is a map showing natural phenomenon, big, huge events at the age changes. You're going to notice where all those little green dots are. You're seeing this one comes out of, which one is that? Taurus? I think that's Taurus. And then here at the very beginning of Aquarius, there's been several events that have happened. Then you don't see any again until the Scorpion, which I can't remember which one that is. Sorry, I'm not super familiar with it. I'm just more interested in the actual dates. Here's some things. We see major natural disasters that tend to occur as the ages change. If you look back in the time of Christ, Mount Vesuvius pretty much obliterated a whole portion of society. You have a complete spiritual awakening in the fact that Christianity came in. There's a whole bunch of things that are beginning to happen there, but there's lots of natural disasters, pandemics, and all kinds of crazy things. At the same time, you have civil, political unrest, along with technological advances and spiritual awakenings. All of those things occurred at the time of Christ and in the 2000 years before it. So we're looking for the same kinds of things to happen as we go from Pisces to Aquarius. And then I'm going to ask the question again, could modern climate change be part of just shifting from one age to the next? I don't have the answer, but I have to put it out there because we see so many natural disasters that are happening right as you change ages. I don't think that's an accident. Now, how does human behavior factor into age changes? And this is where we get into frequency, because if you've paid any attention to some of my videos on about your thoughts, your intents, and your actions, we do not realize how much our behavior, our thoughts, and the energy that we're putting off affects the entire universe around us. So I just wonder, what if we all changed the way we thought and acted? How would that affect Earth, for example? So history shows that people desire leaders. We've already determined that. Leaders can be controlling. And non-controlling leaders generally have happier people. These are just generalizations. Those leaders and governments that desire control tend to experience more civil and political unrest because they're forcing their ideas on other people, which is what we saw at the time of Hitler. They're not considering the people, they're considering what they want to do. And there are cycles of rest and unrest within leadership. It all depends on the style of the leadership. So leaders that want control generally do so through propaganda. And so I talked about Hitler in the last one, but I could see how people could take that and do some interesting things with it. So that's why we are revisiting it slightly today. Propaganda is spread through the media, through government officials, companies, etc. When I say media, I'm also talking about social media. And we'll get into the definition of propaganda here in a minute. How do we know when propaganda is at work? Yes, I know it can't connect to the iCloud. All right. So here is the propaganda definition according to Webster's dictionary. And I think this is a pretty hilarious picture because that pretty well spells what propaganda does. It's instilling fear. Propaganda is the spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person. So it could either be helping or injuring. All right, so keep that in mind. The other thing is propaganda is ideas, facts, or allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause or to damage an opposing cause. So as you can see here, propaganda really can work both ways, for the positive as well as the negative. Society today, and this is kind of hard to see. I should have picked a different color. We see propaganda in all political parties and governments. I mean, you can't function as a political party unless you have some propaganda. The question is that propaganda healthy or unhealthy? Propaganda is a means of control. Whoops. Sorry, I didn't mean to click that button. Let's go back. It's not going to let me. There we go. Who wants the control? An example I used before was Hitler in a previous video. And how can we tell what's propaganda and what's not? So let me say specifically here, what is negative propaganda, so that we can learn to stay away from those things that want to control us. So I'm specifically saying what propaganda is meant to control us. And even positive propaganda can be used as a form of control. Anytime it's used to control you or to get you to think a specific way is not necessarily a good idea because it takes the thinking away from you yourself. Okay, now we go to here. Propaganda clues. Propaganda is meant to push an agenda. Sources, generally the media, they regurgitate the same theme with exact wording. And all you have to do is go to a variety of news sources. And sometimes you hear them, you think they're reading from a script, and then the script has been sent to all of the same news outlets, and they just literally are reading and using the exact same words. I'm like, can't you be a little bit more creative and use your own words? But that's part of what propaganda does, is it uses the exact same words and push, tell, believe. So you know it's being used for propaganda. Truths may be taken and twisted for a specific purpose, and people tend to believe what they hear first. This is called the law of first mention. So whatever comes to your ear gates first, we tend to believe those even over something that comes second and third and fourth and fifth. I don't know why, but that is a tendency. People choose what to think based on personal preferences and beliefs. We become polarized because we believe a certain way. So we want everything to fit within that belief system. So anything that's outside of that belief system, we just throw out. Now, what we want to do is we want to look at the fruit of of any behavior to determine where the truth rests. And that's what we're going to do here now. We're going to use the example of the political atmosphere in the summer of 2024 in the United States. And I'm using some words here only because there are certain words that YouTube doesn't like. And so I'm using the word unaliving. There's an unaliving attempt on one of the candidates that happened at a rally. Then another candidate recently dropped out of the race due to health reasons. So we've got a very volatile situation right now in the political climate of the United States of America. And one of the things I have noticed is both sides are hurling stuff at the other side. They're always, what can I do to damage the other side? But you have to look at it. What are the truths that are being told from both sides? And generally what happens, which is why they spend so much money on advertising, is the one that gets their propaganda out there the most and makes it the most believable is generally the one that wins. But how many of us actually do our own research to read between the lines and figure out where the truth lies, even if we don't agree with the other side? If we basically take something and completely swallow it as truth, no matter what side you're on, we are in grave danger of coming into alignment with propaganda. The human behavior side of this. Side A says the other side is dangerous, is a dictator, and is a threat to democracy, which brings a sense of fear into those who hear the message. And I've listened to several news outlets that are pretty prominent, and they use these same words: dangerous, dictator, and a threat to democracy. And they push that narrative. And I'm watching the faces of these people as they're saying it, and they just got fear all over their faces. So I'll get into that in a minute. Anyway, side B, they're poking fun at the weaknesses within the other camp. So they're poking weaknesses at side A. So they're both going at it. And I just want to tell them to both shut up. Quit saying stupid things about the other side. Let's say what's good. Tell us about what it is you really stand for and forget what the other side is doing. We want to know what you have to say, what you stand on, and then let me as a citizen make my own decision. I don't want you to tell me what to think. That's where we should be. Both sides, A and B, are engaging in verbal and emotional abuse. I'm sorry, I have an issue with that. Anyone who is hurling insults at someone else is engaging in verbal and emotional abuse. There should be none of that. I'll leave that alone. We live in a society that thrives on drama by being adrenaline junkies. We have become addicted to adrenaline. And if you watch some of these news things and they're sitting there like, this person's a dictator, they're dangerous, blah, blah, blah. We get adrenaline rushes through that and it causes drama. And then we thrive on it. We just can't wait to get the next piece of news. And that is called, we have become addicted to media that spews the negative things. And that is how we get our adrenaline, which is, and I've heard a bunch of scientists and neuroscientists, especially, talking about this and how it affects the body. And I'm not going to go into that today, but that's kind of where I'm getting the information. I talk about it all over the website. The media gives people what they want and what will increase their ratings. And so they found that by talking more negative, they're going to get more people watching, which is going to give them higher ratings, which is going to give them more money. So everything is determined based on what people are feeding on. Therefore, we tend to choose sides based on which one provides the best adrenaline rush. And I see this and I'm like, okay. I mean, again, these are all things just to ponder on. Where is the truth? And I had to put a picture of an American flag there because this is America. Both A and B have held a position as U.S. president. So, and again, I'm not naming anybody because in another 30 years, this video is still up. You may not even know the people I'm talking about, but there may be a situation that is exactly the same because history does repeat itself. So you have two people who have been both president of the United States. And both A and B have dealt with a worldwide pandemic. One of them ended it and the other one started it. So they had the same situation from as they transitioned from one to the other. Side A allowed civil unrest to rise. So there was a bunch of riots and there was a bunch of other interesting things that went on. There's a lot more safety issues during their leadership. And they focused a lot on the dangers of side B rather than what the citizens' concerns were. Okay, so I'm just going to let you figure out which one you think that is, because I'm not telling you who's who. Side B, they had a decent economy. There were no wars during their administration, and the citizens felt safer. So if you literally take side A, put it over here, and look at what went on during their administration. Don't look at what they're saying. This is why we're looking at the behavior. Look at what was going on in the country during the time. Don't look at the polls. Don't look at all those other things. You look at what was going on during that time, and then you look at the same thing. So do that for side A, do that for side B. Look and see what was going on in the country at that time, and that's where you can start pulling truth. Listen to who has the most I statements instead of we statements. So go back and listen, as we go from now until when the election is in November 5th, something, I don't know the date, but this is for any time. You listen for those I statements. Who says I the most and who says we the most? And I don't necessarily know the answer to that, but I know this when I was teaching public school and when I was doing the love and logic approach. They said never use I statements because I statements means you're trying to please. You want the student to be pleased with you. Well, we statements mean you're doing it for the student wants to do it for themselves. So we statements are inclusive. I statements are all about me. So it's going to be important to pay attention to how what's going on is the goal focused on them, or is the goal focused on what's going on around them? So you listen to how much they use I and how much they use we. Politicians tell you what you want to hear. A true leader wants to include you and values your opinion. So these are things that I have learned to look at. I am not a subscriber to any political party, never have been. I vote based on their actions. All of the other things that come out that they say, you just kind of have to roll your eyes and okay, look at the character. There's a lot of things that you look at and everyone's going to have a different barometer, but the key is if we're making decisions based on our preconceived ideas and beliefs, chances are we're not going to find the balance in the middle. So what's our part? Do not come into agreement with any abusive language. This is how we change things, because I'm just one small person living in North Idaho. It's 100 degrees out today, but it's still a beautiful day in the neighborhood. But I am not going to come into any abuse. I'm not coming into agreement with any abusive language. We need to speak words of peace, love, joy, and other positive frequencies that override anything negative. Negative frequencies actually affect your body negatively. They cause sickness, disease, all kinds of icky stuff. It wasn't until I started changing my mindsets and started changing what came out of my mouth through reframing my thoughts, my intents, and my actions to something that was more positive that I finally got healed of a 19-year illness. So I'm speaking out of experience in this, that when we speak words of peace, love, joy, and positivity over other people, despite what we think about them, then it changes us first. And it also leads to how everything around us responds. But we may disagree with our leaders, but we still can speak positive words over them. This releases a frequency where they can choose to align with. I mean, you all hear about this energy field that's around us. I mean, science can measure it. They've taken a device that they can kind of put it near you and they can show this, and it'll show up in colors that completely surrounds you. It's kind of cool. I don't remember what it's called, but we all carry an energy. It's like when you walk into a store and you stand behind someone in the line in front of you and you get the heebie-jeebies. I mean, that the energy that that person is putting off, you just want to stay away from. But at another time, there's going to be someone standing in front of you, you're just like, oh man, I just wish I could go hug them. There's something about that person that I just want to be around them. Imagine if more of us did that, how that would affect our politicians. We have to consider the possibility that words of chaos are heard in the earth, and the earth is simply responding to the chaos within us. I wonder if we can change the direction of what happens in the change of ages by simply changing our attitudes. I just throw that out there. If we want to see positive changes, we must adjust what comes out of our mouth. We cannot come into agreement with nastiness. If you hear something nasty, the worst thing we can do is to go spread it or to go post it on X. It's called X now, or Twitter or Instagram or any of those other, which I never used any of them. Oh, I heard this. What do you think about blah, 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 blah? No, just stop spreading any stuff that's nasty. If we all stopped doing that, maybe the politicians would change how they present things. So how to stay away from propaganda. This is the negative. I just, in general, propaganda, I just need to reframe what I think about propaganda because it can be good or bad. But the negative propaganda, we have to do our own research. Just because somebody on the news says something doesn't mean it's true. They're saying it through their thought processes, which is not the way it used to be. There was a time where we had no idea what people's political persuasions were, and I prefer that. I prefer to not know what your political persuasion is, because we shouldn't necessarily know that about each other, because we can be friends and we can agree to disagree and still work with one another. And we cannot believe everything that we hear. And we choose media that's based on positive outcomes. Just think, if everybody in the United States quit listening to any media outlet that just regurgitates nastiness, then that they would probably go away, or they would start changing what they put out there. We need to let go of preconceived ideas, even if they're opposite of our beliefs. That is the hardest thing to do. I found that when I completely let go of everything I ever thought about how life functions, especially when because I was dealing with trying to get rid of an illness. And I had to deal with the emotional stuff. And once I dealt with those emotional things, then I was healed. But who thinks of it that way? We're so used to, here, take a pill, you'll get better. But that's not always the best way to do things. If what you hear makes you fearful, it's probably propaganda of the bad kind. Do not listen to things that make you fearful. Turn away. What I do when something like that comes to me, I just say, oh, I'm just going to cover that with complete love. I'm going to cover it with peace. I'm going to cover it with joy and get myself into that place of not receiving and coming into alignment with anything that wants to bring fear. And we have to look at both sides to find our way to the middle. When we find our way to the middle, you're going to find that there's truths on both sides that we can bring into the middle, that we can come into alignment with. And we have to speak positivity over all those that are involved. We cannot turn around and repeat the negative stuff if we want to see change. And on that note, I want to thank you for being part of this presentation. There is an email if you want to email me. And there's my website, healingfrequenciesmusic.com. I will put a link to that in the chat. I mean, in the video below. Okay, on that note, law. I encourage you that when you hear negative coming from any political thing, that you're just like, turn around and take those words of negativity and bathe them in love. Bathe them, or put a blanket of love, or put a blanket of peace, or put a blanket of joy, and then just send it back. I mean, it will make a huge difference on how we respond. And then we're going to learn to not come into an agreement and alignment with all that stuff that's out there. So I'm going to leave you with that. And whatever you do, there is truth on both sides of the aisle. Bring it to the middle and go from there. Have an absolutely bodacious day.